Welcome back to Where You Live with Gene and Tony. We're broadcasting from the Concierge Landscape Studios. We're brought to you this hour by Extreme Exteriors. We were going to have on the line next our good friend Dan Greenstein from Bernick Lifson. He's in a meeting. We'll catch him in another segment coming up. Not to worry. We've got to him that we're going to ask some questions. There's an article entitled, "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Meeting." Or, when is a homeowner association like the state of Wisconsin? And Tony, you remember, I probably back in the
I don't get it.
In the summer, or I think it was the summer, wasn't it? When the Wisconsin,
spring,
maybe spring, even before. That's right. The Wisconsin legislature, both the Democrats and Republicans, tried to use quorum and the guidelines for when a meeting could be held and how. And meetings were held or not held, and both sides were crying foul. Well,
sure.
Can the same thing happen?
They were manipulating.
They were
system.
manipulating things, and and so could that same kind of thing happen in a homeowners association? I think it possibly could be. And we're going to talk to Dan about some of those things. We also have a regular listener of the program, too, that we'll have on in just a little bit, too, who has a question for both Tony and I, and we will answer that in just a little bit. But let's go ahead with our next story, and this is an opinion piece from the Orlando Sentinel called "Just Who's Managing Who?" Folks, if anytime anybody becomes a member of a homeowner association, it is kind of confusing, I would say, when they take a look at the dynamics that take place with the management company, the board of directors. The board of directors supposedly have authority, but then why is it always followed through by the management company?
Why is the management company mailing me things and answering my phone calls? Yeah.
So so it was a piece that I think that kind of confusion is something a lot of people
experience,
and so we'd like to talk about that in this opinion piece. It begins by saying there is an alarming trend that a gentleman said I've noticed lately regarding the relationship between a management company and the association that employs them. He said last month, while he was teaching a course for certification in Orlando, Florida, he said it became increasingly clear that many board members simply believe that their management company is in charge of their condominium or homeowner association and not the board of directors. And he said he thought that this was proved by statements that he heard during those seminars. People were saying things like, our management company said we must sign with this law firm or this accounting firm, or our management company said we must use this landscaping company, or our management company decides who can buy or lease in our community and who can't. And so he said people seem to be confused.
Yeah, well, his impression was many boards think their management company is in charge.
Yeah.
And I've seen that, haven't you? Gene, haven't you heard and seen boards speak in those terms?
Yeah, yes. I think that happens not because of state statute or what the law requires. That happens, I think, out of laziness.
Well, I think that might be one reason. And I have other reasons why it might happen.
Yes, but one that I would like to put forward is it can be laziness on both sides, and here's why I think that. Number one, it's a lot harder for a property manager, to take the time to educate the board, to go through a situation and to analyze it, and for them to come to the formation and a conclusion themselves.
And so it's more. Yes, of course, it takes more time for a management company to advise its board and help them find their way through a process
to get to the point
to make their own decision.
To get to that point where they make the decision and they take ownership of that.
So, what's easier to do? What's the easier way to do that?
Well, then I think what they will do is they'll say, well, you've got you've got these bids in front of you. I think this one's the best one to go
The
with.
manager will say that.
And the manager will say that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's laziness on the board, where the board says, I don't want to take the time to understand all of this. I just want to get in and out of the meeting quickly. Yeah. So just take care of it.
Mr. Manager, just take care of it.
Yes. Yeah. And so that kind of dynamic takes place quite easily in a number of associations, and it's something that isn't nefarious by anybody's part, but it is a true dynamic that I see happens over and over again, and I think that's one of the reasons.
I think that I think a big reason why that has occurred, at least in our market in the last 10 years, if you recall at the beginning of the century, beginning of the 2000s, townhome and condo associations were booming, new building going on in the Twin Cities metro area. Also, a lot of existing apartment communities were converting to condo because there was easy money out there to buy a home. Vacancy rates were rising for rentals. So apartment owners said, hey, you know what? I've got a 36-unit building in uptown Minneapolis. I can't get it rented. I can't fill it because everybody is buying homes instead. I'm going to convert it to condos. Yep. And that means I can sell each of those units. Well, the management company that was managing that rental property doesn't want to lose that client, do they?
No.
So they said, hey, you know what? We can manage your condo association. That's what we do best. And the truth of the matter was, it wasn't necessarily what the rental management company did best.
So you're saying that one of the things that happened just because of the dynamics of
the
economy and market was people that are experienced management firms, but not necessarily experienced in association management, started to pick up the ball.
Sure, and do
and made an assumption. And they just didn't have the expertise or some of the knowledge that was needed.
And I heard it over and over and over again from these rental management companies. They're used to laying down the law in their apartment community. They're used to being the sheriff in town and saying, this is what your lease reads, this is how you do it, this is the way it's done. They had a very difficult time making the transition to homeowner association management because they were not accustomed to working for a committee of people, and they were not accustomed to taking orders from a committee of people.
So you're saying that probably in this kind of scenario that you're talking about, probably what happened is some of these people who ended up buying were people who were actually renters in the building before too.
Well, I think that's part of it too. The new owners who are not educated in homeowner association ownership also don't know what to expect. So when they sat down with the manager and the manager says this is the way it has to be done, they just went along with it because the manager advised them to. So I think that caused a lot of confusion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. I think these two things are both very common. There are probably another 3 or 4 that we could probably list if we took the time as well.
I have to say this, too. You know, you and I have both taught a lot of classes or done a lot of speaking for the Multi-Housing Association. And 5, 6, 7 years ago, lots of rental managers were in our classes where we were talking about CIC management, condo association management. They were racking their brains. And in fact, I was asked this question over and over again. How do I get these people to do what I tell them? And I had to say, you don't get these people to do what you tell them. You're supposed to do what they tell you. And you know what?
Yeah.
One after another, many rental management companies drop that type of business.
And that's a perfect point, which segues to what this person really was talking about that is important. And I think we both agree with their what they ascertained as being very important in that relationship between a board, an association, and the management company. They said, number one, that the board does have the authority, not the management company. Right. The management company serves at the pleasure of the board.
That's right. It says right here, the association is their boss.
That's right.
The manager's boss.
Pretty simple.
Not the other way around.
And you will need to take, and what that means is, as the boss, you need to take the time because at the end of the day, the buck stops with you ultimately.
Oh, good point. Good point. The governing documents are going to say the board is responsible for everything that goes on in that property. Mm-hmm. So do you really want to turn that over to some managing agent to just take care of everything when ultimately the responsibility lands back in your lap?
Yeah.
I think you should be involved.
Yes. And so, being on the board is it's an important job. There's no getting around that at all. And it's one that you have to take with, I think you have to get some, I think it's important to get some training. It's important to be involved with other professionals. That's why we promote organizations like CAI, Community Associations Institute.
That's right.
Minnesota Multi-Housing. Folks, there's these great organizations that have information, people that you can network with that can get you the information that you need so that you can do a great job.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, there's just a couple other things that I'd like to mention just with this story before we go on. So let's take a quick break now and do that. And then afterwards, let's take a call from one of our listeners, too. More after these messages.